She was lying on the gravel at the edge of the parking lot, half hidden behind the dumpster, and my first thought, God forgive me, was that she was a bag of old winter coats someone had left out for donation pickup. Then her hand moved. I don't know how long she'd been there. It was a Tuesday evening in late November, and in Sudbury, that means dark by 4:30, the kind of cold that feels personal. I'd stayed late at the community center, helping set up for the Christmas bazaar. I'm 63, retired from the school board, and I fill my time the way most women like me do. Volunteer work, too much coffee, and pretending I don't worry about my son as much as I do. I almost didn't cross the lot. My car was parked on the other side, and I usually cut through the side door. But something, I still can't explain it, made me walk the long way around that night. I crouched down beside her, and it took me 2 full seconds to recognize my own daughter-in-law. Her name is Abigail. She's 28 years old, a dental hygienist. And until that moment, I would have described her as the most put-together young woman I'd ever met. She always had her nails done, always smelled like something expensive but not overbearing, always brought homemade butter tarts when she came to Sunday dinner. She was lying on the gravel in a thin cardigan with one shoe missing, and when I touched her shoulder, she flinched so hard she cracked the back of her head against the wall. "It's me," I said. "It's me. You're safe." She looked at me for a long moment like she was trying to remember how to trust a face. Then she whispered, "His sister did this, and your son knew." I drove her home to my home, not theirs. I didn't ask questions yet. I got her inside, got her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she couldn't quite hold steady, and I called my younger sister Norma, who lives 20 minutes away in Chelmsford and who has been a registered nurse for 35 years. "Come now," I said when she picked up. "I need you." She didn't ask questions either. That's the thing about Norma. She just said, "Putting my coat on." While I waited, I got a proper look at Abigail. There was bruising around her left wrist, already turning that deep plum color. That means it's been there for hours. A cut above her eyebrow, dried. She was shaking, not from cold, though she was certainly cold, the kind of shaking that comes from inside, from something your body can't process fast enough. "When did you last eat?" I asked. She had to think about it. "Yesterday, I think. I put bread in the toaster. I kept my hands busy so she wouldn't see that mine were shaking too." Norma arrived and took over with the quiet efficiency that I have always envied about her. She examined the wrist, not broken, but badly sprained, cleaned the cut, checked Abigail's pupils, asked her questions in that calm, clinical voice that doesn't leave room for panic. I stood in the doorway and watched my daughter-in-law slowly become a person again under my sister's hands. It wasn't until Norma gave me the small nod, "She's okay, nothing immediately critical," that I sat down across from Abigail and said, "Tell me everything." It took her a long time to start. She kept turning the mug in her hands. "My son's name is Warren. He's 31, works in mine planning for one of the operations north of the city. Good job. Sensible young man, or I thought he was. He and Abigail had been married for 2 years. From the outside, I would have said they were doing well. They'd just bought a townhouse in New Sudbury. They were talking about starting a family. What I didn't know, what apparently I was the last person to know, was that his sister had spent the better part of the last year quietly dismantling Abigail's life. His sister's name is Denna. She's 26, and she has always been what my late husband used to call slippery. Not dishonest exactly, not in ways you could point to. More like someone who is always standing slightly behind the truth, letting you believe things she never technically said. I'd raised her the same as I'd raised Warren after their father left. Same house, same rules, same Sunday dinners. I used to wonder if I'd done something wrong, or if some people simply come into the world already tilted in a certain direction. Dina had moved back to Sudbury 8 months earlier after a relationship ended in Toronto. She'd been staying in their spare room. Just temporarily, Warren told me. Just until she gets on her feet. 8 months is a long time to be getting on your feet. According to Abigail, it started small. Dina would make comments. Nothing you could call outright cruel, just the kind of observation that burrows under your skin and stays there. Comments about Abigail's spending, made in front of Warren. Comments about how Abigail had changed since they got married. Little questions, asked with great innocence about whether Abigail's family had a history of anxiety. Then it escalated. Abigail had a joint savings account with Warren, their house fund, money they'd been putting away for years toward a larger property when the time came. $62,000. She showed me the bank notification on her phone, and I had to read it twice before my brain would accept what I was seeing. 3 weeks ago, $40,000 had been transferred out of that account. Warren had authorized it. He told Abigail it was an investment. A friend of Danae's had a business opportunity, a guaranteed return, very time-sensitive. He'd meant to mention it sooner. He promised it would be back within 6 weeks. When Abigail tried to look into the details of this investment, Dana told Warren that Abigail was being paranoid and controlling. Warren, to his very great shame, chose to believe his sister. That was a month ago. The money was gone. The friend was unreachable. And when Abigail had confronted Warren about it the night before, really confronted him, finally said out loud that she believed Dana had manipulated him into a scam and that $40,000 of their savings was never coming back. Dana had been in the next room, listening. This morning, Abigail told me Dana had offered to drive her to her dental office downtown. Warren had already left for work. On the way, Dana pulled into the parking lot of the community center and said she wanted to talk. Talk turned into accusations. Accusations turned into Dana telling Abigail that she could either sign a document. She actually had a document, Abigail said, something printed. She didn't even know what it was, agreeing not to pursue the money. Or Dana would tell Warren things about Abigail that would end the marriage. When Abigail refused, Dana grabbed her wrist. Then she got out of the car, left Abigail there, and drove away. Abigail had been in that parking lot for 7 hours. Her phone had died. She was too shaken to walk anywhere and too ashamed to go inside and ask a stranger for help. I sat with that for a moment. 7 hours. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" I finally asked. "Any time in the last month? Why didn't you come to me?" She looked at her mug. "Because she's your daughter," she said. "And he's your son. And I didn't want you to have to choose." I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine. "Abigail," I said, "I raised Warren to be a decent man, and right now he is not behaving like one. I will deal with that. But what happened to you today is a crime, and I need you to understand that you are not alone in this. Not tonight, not any night." Norma, standing behind Abigail, caught my eye over her head. "We have known each other for 63 years. We didn't need to say anything." I called Warren at 9:15 that evening. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he'd been awake, probably wondering why Abigail wasn't home. "Your wife is at my house," I said. "She's safe, but you need to come here now, and you need to come alone." The silence that followed told me more than any words could have. "Mom, whatever Abigail said, Warren." I kept my voice very even. "I have pictures of her wrist. I have pictures of the cut on her face. I have a registered nurse who examined her sitting at my kitchen table. And I have Abigail's bank notification on my phone. You are going to get in your car and you are going to come to me and we are going to talk about all of it. Do you understand me?" He was at my door in 20 minutes. He looked terrible. I'll say that for him. He looked like a man who had been lying to himself for a very long time and had just run out of road. He stood in my hallway with his coat still on and looked at his wife, sitting at my kitchen table, and something in his face collapsed. "Abigail," he said. "Sit down," I told him. "I am not a yeller. I never was. Not even when my children were teenagers doing the kinds of things teenagers do. I find that a steady voice carries farther than a raised one." So I sat across from my son and I told him, calmly, methodically, in order, everything that his wife had told me. I showed him the bank notification. I showed him the photographs Norma had taken of the bruising. I put Abigail's dead phone on the table and told him she had been in a parking lot for 7 hours because she was afraid to ask for help. He kept looking at the table. "I didn't know she grabbed her," he said finally. "I swear to you I didn't know that. But you knew about the money." A long pause. She said it was an investment. Warren. I waited until he looked at me. You transferred $40,000 out of your joint savings account, money that belongs equally to your wife, without her genuine informed consent. You did this because your sister told you to, and when Abigail raised concerns, you called her paranoid. Do you understand what you've done? He was quiet for a very long time. I think I've been. He stopped. Started again. I think she's been in my ear for months. Everything Abigail said, Denna would have a different version. I don't know. I stopped trusting my own judgment about what was real. That is called manipulation, I said, and it does not excuse what happened today, but it is something we can work with if you are willing to do what comes next. He looked up. What comes next? Norma, from the kitchen doorway, said quietly, first, you call the police. He blinked at her. Your wife was physically restrained against her will and left in a parking lot in November, Norma said. In Ontario, that's not a family disagreement. That's assault and forcible confinement. You call the police and you tell them the truth. To his credit, and I was watching him carefully, ready for resistance, Warren didn't argue. He put his head in his hands for a moment. Then he straightened up. Okay, he said. Okay, he said. Yes. Abigail looked at him for the first time since he'd arrived. Something passed between them. Not resolution, not yet. They had a long way to go before they got there. But the beginning of something. The first crack of light under a door. I called the non-emergency line, explained what had happened, and an officer came to the house by 11 that evening. Abigail gave her statement. Warren gave his. The officer explained the process carefully, told Abigail what to expect, gave her a case number, and told her she could apply for a peace bond if she needed one. She took notes on her phone. Norma had charged it in the kitchen and nodded at everything the officer said with the focus of someone who is turning fear into a plan. That part, watching her do that, made me unbelievably proud of her. Dina called Warren's phone 4 times while the officer was still in the house. He didn't answer. When the officer left, he turned the phone face down on the coffee table and left it there. She's gonna want to know what's happening, he said. Let her wonder, I said. In the days that followed, things moved the way these things do. Slowly in some places, faster than you expect in others. My lawyer, a woman I've known since our children were in school together, spent an afternoon with Abigail going over what their options were for recovering the money. It wasn't simple. The transfer had been authorized by Warren, which complicated things, but there were grounds to pursue the third party who'd received the funds, and depending on what could be demonstrated about Danae's role in orchestrating the transfer, there might be civil liability there too. In Ontario, a financial advisor friend told us, there are fraud recovery options that most people don't know about. We were going to know about all of them. Warren hired his own lawyer. He asked that Dana vacate the townhouse immediately. Dina did not vacate immediately. She sent a long text message calling Abigail a manipulator, calling me worse things, saying Warren would regret this. Warren forwarded the message to both lawyers and to the police file. Every word she wrote was documentation. Here is what I have learned, at 63, about people who operate the way Dana operates. They rely on silence. They rely on the people they've hurt being too confused, too ashamed, or too afraid of disrupting the family to speak clearly. The moment you start speaking clearly, to lawyers, to police, to each other, they don't know what to do. All their power was in the silence, and the silence is gone. Within 2 weeks, Dana had moved out and was staying with a friend in Hanmer. The individual who had received the transferred funds was located. He was real, though the investment was not. And Warren and Abigail's lawyer began proceedings to recover what could be recovered. It would take time. It might not be everything, but it was moving. The harder work was between Warren and Abigail. I stayed out of most of it. That is the right thing to do. They needed to find their own way through, and I am not interested in inserting myself into my son's marriage beyond what was asked of me. But I had one conversation with Warren, just the two of us, one Sunday afternoon in my kitchen, that I think about still. I asked him how it had happened. Not the money, not the specifics. How he'd gotten to a place where he chose his sister's version of reality over his own wife's. He sat with that for a long time. It was gradual, he said finally. It wasn't ever one big thing. It was just, Denna would say something, and I'd push back, and she'd look at me like I was breaking her heart, and I'd give in, and then it was easier to give in the next time. And after a while, I think I'd outsourced my judgment to her. And by the time Abigail was raising real concerns, I'd already been trained to dismiss her. I thought about the little boy he'd been. I thought about the years after his father left, when Denna had figured out, very young, that the way to manage her own pain was to make sure someone else always felt worse. You were soft with her because you felt guilty, I said. You thought if you held firm, it meant you didn't love her. He didn't answer. But I saw that I'd landed somewhere true. Love doesn't mean saying yes to everything, I told him. I didn't teach you that. I should have said it more clearly when you were growing up, and I'm sorry I didn't. But it is never too late to learn it. He nodded. He looked out the window at the street. She's my sister, he said quietly, not defending her, just acknowledging the grief of it. I know, I said. She's my daughter, and she did real harm to real people, and she is going to have to live with the consequences of that. Both of those things are true at the same time. That was the conversation. We had lunch after. He helped me wash the dishes. He left at 2 and texted me when he got home the way I'd asked him to do when he was 17, and which he still does sometimes without me having to ask. By spring, Warren and Abigail were in counseling. Real counseling, not the kind people do to check a box, but the kind with a therapist they see every week and take seriously. Abigail told me on one of her Sunday visits that she'd said things in those sessions she'd never said out loud before. Things about her own family, her own patterns, things that the events of the past year had pushed to the surface whether she was ready or not. It's hard, she said, but it's good hard. I knew what she meant. The money, $31,000 of the $40,000, was eventually recovered through the civil proceeding, not all of it, probably never all of it, but enough that they could rebuild, enough that the loss, while real, wasn't permanent. Dinah, as far as I know, is still in Hanmer. She sent me a message at Christmas. Nothing apologetic, just a photograph of a wreath on a door with Merry Christmas, Mom written underneath. I looked at it for a long time before I put my phone down. I don't know what my relationship with my daughter will look like going forward. I know it won't look like what it was, but then what it wasn't real. It was me not seeing clearly, and I don't plan to stop seeing clearly again. Norma came for Christmas dinner. Abigail and Warren came. Abigail brought butter tarts. Norma brought a bottle of Niagara Riesling she'd been saving since 2019. We ate too much and stayed at the table talking until nearly 10 o'clock. At one point, Warren looked around the table at me, at Norma, at his wife, and said, "I don't deserve you people." Norma pointed her fork at him. "No," she said, "you don't, but here we are." We all laughed, even Warren. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband, raised 2 children, put 31 years into a school system that doesn't always deserve the people who give themselves to it, and learned slowly, imperfectly, with a great many corrections along the way, that the instinct that made me walk the long way around that parking lot is the same instinct that has always mattered most. Pay attention. Show up. When someone you love is on the ground, you don't walk past. Everything else you figure out from there.